Tom, are you okay?
I lost her.
Her?
She was going to be this epic, trilogy-worthy character. I was going to be the hottest writer in Hollywood. But I can't get past Act 1!
You need some writers group therapy. Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers. Are you ready for your session? The doctors are in. And if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. You can find us online at writersgrouptherapy.com and also WG Therapy on Twitter and Instagram. Personally, you can find us at
Tom_Loveman on Twitter and Tom Loveman on Instagram.
And I'm at Roshni Lamino on Twitter and Moonlily Music on Instagram. So today we have a very special guest and a sweet dear friend of mine, Stephen Smith, four-time Emmy-nominated producer, produced over 200 documentaries about film. What is the word
Woo!
documentarian? How do they call that?
That
What's the
sounds
title?
good to me.
Documentarian? We'll just make it up.
Documentarian.
But you've done a bazillion documentaries. You've worked with amazing people, like you've got to interview Julie Andrews, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I know you did something for Star Wars. You just did something for Aquaman.
Yes,
Oh
I've
my
been very,
gosh.
very lucky, and it all starts with the script, of course. Everything begins with writing, and I've written two books about film composers, and I used to write for the LA Times, so I really love the written word, and I love taking true stories and trying to make them as exciting as fiction.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. We had you at a writers group, and you showed us some of the stuff you've worked on. I really love the 50th anniversary Sound of Music documentary you did with Julie
Oh,
Andrews.
thank you, Tom.
That
That
was
was
great,
fun.
and I'm a big Star Wars fan, so that was great. From a writer's perspective, when you're doing these kind of projects, you're dealing with an existing, intellectual property. How do you approach it? As of course, it's a documentary, so it's a completely different development of the story. How do you approach that?
Well, it's important to know in whether it's fiction or nonfiction what story you want to tell. And thinking of the project that I did with Julie Andrews maybe a good example because when I produced this 1 hour documentary on The Sound of Music when the film was going to be released on its 50th anniversary on Blu-ray, there had already been hours and hours and hours of documentaries and films and specials about the making of the movie, the stage musical, the whole thing. So I thought, what can be done that's different? And because I was going to get to go to Salzburg, where they made the film and where the real Von Trapp family lived, and go there with Julie Andrews, I wanted to tell a very personal story, not the kind of making of the movie. All that had already been done, and it was going to be part of the video set already. So I read Julie Andrews' autobiography, which had been published a few years earlier, that focused not on her most famous years, but on her childhood and teen years, which were very difficult. And I realized that she had a lot in common with the character she plays in Sound of Music, Maria von Trapp, who was, of course, a real person. And I realized they were both people who were sort of saved from difficult lives by music. Music saved Maria von Trapp's life when she and her family fled, Nazi-controlled Austria, and Julie Andrews found her path out of a difficult life through music as well. And when she made The Sound of Music, no one had ever seen her on film before. She had only made one movie, this Disney movie called Mary Poppins that hadn't come out yet. And there was some concern about whether she would even if she was going to make it in the movies. So I met with her and I told her how much I loved her autobiography, how candid it was, without seeming like it was trying to settle any scores or be salacious, but it was very, very honest. And I said, that's exactly what I would love to do in this documentary is really talk about who you were as a person then and how this incredible experience of making this film changed you. I mean, when you went into the film, you'd shot a movie that hadn't come out yet, Mary Poppins. By the time you finished the movie, you'd won an Academy Award for Best Actress for Mary Poppins. And then when The Sound of Music came out, your life changed and was never the same. And she really embraced that idea. And I took a lot of careful notes reading her autobiography over and over about what words she used since I was going to be writing narration for her speaking to camera. I thought, does she say movies? No, she says film. Does she say this? So I really sort of created in my mind the vocabulary of her speech, and I tried to capture her voice. So that was a case where I was writing for someone else, but also trying to find a very personal story, which I think we did. And for other projects of mine, for example, when I was a producer on a very long-running series on A&E called A&E Biography, I was lucky enough to do profiles on filmmakers, actors, everybody from Johnny Depp to people from the 1930s and 40s. And there you had to sort of figure out what story you were telling. Part of it was based on who you could interview, who was alive, who was an expert. And if you were lucky enough and the subject was still alive, I'd try to spend a lot of time with them and get to know them. And then really know clearly what the point of view was going to be on the material, what the structure was going to be, how to structure it in a way that was dramatic but not false, that wasn't fake drama, and just be as truthful as possible. I really feel that for a good documentary, if you can combine information with emotion, you're probably going to have a good film.
How did you get into this? Did you always want to do documentaries?
Not really. I think, geography is our destiny, and I was born out here in Los Angeles. And I was lucky enough to have a brother who he's 17 years older than I am, and he was a Broadway performer when I was a kid. So he would introduce me to all these amazing people in Hollywood, these old time film stars that he knew. And he introduced me to this family friend who was sort of like my Uncle Bob. Bob Osborne. And Bob Osborne, who was then a writer for the Hollywood Reporter, later became the host of Turner Classic Movies and did that for many years. And Bob really mentored me and showed me that there was a way to make a living uh, making history come to life through books, through documentaries. And I think really my brother and Robert Osborne were my chief inspirations and really showed me the path of how to do this, because I did do some fiction writing early in my career. I wrote for some TV shows, I did animation for Disney and other places, but I really found that what I loved most was making documentaries about the arts, about process, about why did somebody choose A over B or B over C, and how their own personal traumas and difficulties shape them into being the creative person that they are.
That's cool. Now, I mean, because you are working in, not to make it a dirty word, but in reality
Hmm.
TV, right? You're not making a scripted thing, but not that
As
kind of
opposed
reality,
to
but because it
unreality
Oh.
TV, yeah.
yeah, but because it is a documentary and so you're talking to people about their life stories, how do you deal if something comes up that's a bit sensitive or you know what I mean? How do you
Oh,
deal
yeah.
with that?
That's a great question. And that's probably a show in and of itself. And to be very honest, it depends how much independence you have. I mean, when I was writing my books, I could write whatever I wanted, really, and it was between me and the editors. When you're making a documentary for, say, network television, you know that there's certain things you can't do. There's some language you can't have, or maybe some things. But also, if you are enlisting for if you're licensing film clips, if you are collaborating with a major power player in Hollywood, they are sometimes sensitive about what's depicted, and you make choices about what is important to keep and what isn't important to keep. And it's a bit of a trade off. And I think that fortunately, when I look back over about 27 years of doing this, I feel that I was able to tell really honest stories about people's lives with as few compromises as possible.
Did you ever do something where someone told you after the fact that they wish you hadn't put something in?
you know, um, Sort of. There was an actress named Maureen O'Hara. Some of you may remember from movies like How Green Was My Valley, and very fiery redhead star of the 40s and 50s, and worked into the 90s. And she was very protective of her life. She had a version of her life that didn't always match up with the real version of her life. Like, she completely deleted one husband from her life, and we put that husband back in. Uh, and
Fix it
she
in
had to
post, so to
kind of,
speak.
yes. So that was a good example of kind of saying, well, we really have to talk about that, because I know that you were really young and the marriage was annulled quickly, but you did get married. So we kept that in. And so we worked with her, but I wasn't going to tell a story that wasn't truthful.
Wow. I know now you've just gone freelance very recently, but I know when I met you, you were working for Trailer Park and you were doing all those behind the scenes featurettes and stuff that people see on
Yes.
DVDs, which you said are kind of coming out of they're falling out of style now.
Well, we're in a really interesting time, as we all know. I mean, how many of your listeners, ask yourselves, what was the last time you bought a DVD or Blu-ray? And unless you're really into classic films, which are really stronger than ever in that format, you'll get these beautiful editions of older films or classic films from places like the Criterion Collection and others. But the big movie studios are really putting their money into streaming, and I totally get it because that's how I watch most things too. And when it comes to selling their films, social and digital media are more useful than a lot of behind the scenes features. So I love doing for many years the behind the scenes material for movies on DVD and Blu-ray. Once in a while, I mean, the Julie Andrews project was one of those. I could make a 90-minute film if it was a big, big movie or had a big story, or you could do the equivalent of that much time. And even if it was basically from the studio's point of view, a selling tool to have this material on it, I always viewed that material the same way as my documentaries or the books that I wrote or a journalistic news article that I wrote. It always had to be truthful and informational and compelling in its own right. I know it was there to sell, but that didn't mean it couldn't be truthful and good. So I really hope that as our world pretty much switches into streaming and discs all but go away, as they probably will, I hope that there will still be a place for really smart examinations of how filmmakers do their work, how writers write. Because I had so many directors when I was supervising an audio commentary say that, along with whatever other experience they had, that listening to commentaries from great directors or filmmakers were really useful for them. So I always saw those DVD and Blu-ray packages as kind of like a little film school on a disc as much as possible.
I was just going to ask, like, what do you think's going to be lost? But I mean, maybe it really does only appeal to, aspiring filmmakers. Is it meant for the average person? Those featurettes.
I think it's both. I think everybody's fascinated with the movies, and what I always tried to show was that making films, television, it's really, really hard work. It isn't all glamour. People don't just show up and have fun. They get up incredibly well. You spend years of your life writing, selling, pitching, and then when you finally get something made. Uh, that's just the beginning of the process. People have often said the movies get made three times. There's the one you write, there's the one you shoot, and then there's the one that you edit. And it changes all along the way. And it's a really, really difficult process. And I've always been drawn to stories of the challenges that happen on a movie. And I don't mean people fighting or any of that, although that sometimes can be part of it, but really just the choices of how people got through something, how when everything went wrong, they found a solution that sometimes turned out to be better than what they were originally going to do.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love when the DVDs came out and we got to see behind the scenes and do all the behind the scenes stuff. I was really into it, but then I guess as it moved on and we started to do like iTunes, a lot of that kind of got. They still tried to put them on iTunes, but then a lot of it, it just wasn't a
It's
big
not the
selling
same.
point.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
because they would always put out like 4 or 5 versions of a movie. Like you'd have the regular version,
Right.
and
Right.
the director's cut, and then the ultimate edition, and then the franchises boxed them together with unseen stuff. And yeah, so a lot of
Yes.
ways it was a revenue producing thing, and maybe it's kind of they still, I think that the Blu-rays still have a lot of extra stuff on them, but it's evolved, and it's evolved, so has your career, and so now you're doing some new stuff. You're doing some back to
Yeah.
some writing, actually,
I'm,
huh?
I'm writing another book now and having a great time doing that. But I was going to say, really, you are the future. I think podcasts are carrying on that tradition more than anything else because there are so many good podcasts out there about process. And I love your podcast.
Aw,
And I love when you
thanks.
Oh,
talk, yeah, absolutely. You talk about, how to get out of a rut. You talk about trends and things that are happening. You analyze things, but you make it fun. And that's exactly what, I always try to do in my work and continue to try to do, which is share things and find there's got to be a way in for people, find to feel a connection. And that's the other thing I love about telling true stories in print or in TV or in film documentaries is that you can be Steven Spielberg and you can still wake up with tremendous insecurities or doubt about that day, or maybe that project doesn't work. There's no guarantee of success for anyone. And there's no guarantee that a totally unknown person can't succeed. That it all comes down to talent and a million lucky breaks and a lot of hard work. So I love what you do in the podcast, and there's so many good ones out there that are talking about how to write and the process of it all. And just because I read it recently, and I had nothing to do with this, there was a great book series done in the 80s and 90s called Backstory. And it was a collection of interviews with screenwriters. And it's a really good series. So I encourage your listeners out there who are really interested in how classic films were structured and written, really timeless things about what make movies work. I was really enjoying reading those. So thank you for carrying on the tradition of helping writers write and help storytellers tell their stories.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And if people want to find you online, Stephen, where can they do that?
Where will they find me online? I have a very low social media presence right now, and that is by choice. But when my next book comes out next year, that will change. So we'll talk then.
Okay.
Sure.
But in the meantime, just keep listening to this podcast.
Aw. And I can tell all of you guys, you can actually find Steven's work on a lot of DVDs at Universal Studios. There's just so many documentaries you've done that are all over the marketplace that I don't think people even realize. So,
Well, they're out there, and yeah,
They've
if you
probably
see it,
seen
maybe I
something
did
and
it.
they don't even know it. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on
Oh,
our show.
thank you. This was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll have you back when you get your next project done.
Sounds
Great.
good.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you guys next week.